Hi, everyone. We're just going to wait a few minutes to make sure that all the folks can get into the webinar, but we'll be starting in just a few minutes. Thank you so much. Hi, everyone. And once again, we'll get started in just a second. Just letting the last few folks get in and we'll get started in about a minute. Thank you all so much. All right. Hi, everyone. We are ready to get started. I wanted to start off by introducing myself. My name is Leo Angulo. I use he, him pronouns, and I am the artistic coordinator here at New York Theater Workshop. Thank you all so much for being here with us virtually. I wanted to get started first with a land acknowledgement, and just to say that New York Theater Workshop is situated on the island of Manhattan. Manhattan has always been a gathering and trading place for many indigenous peoples, where nations intersected from all four directions since time immemorial. It was a place to gather and sometimes to seek refuge during times of conflict and struggle. The staff and trustees of New York Theater Workshop pay respect to all of their ancestors past, present, to their future generations. We acknowledge that our theater and our work is situated on the island of Manhattan, traditional lands of the Munsee Lenape, the Canarsie, Unkechaug, Watinnecock, Shinnecock, Regawank, and the Haudenosaunee Confederacy. We respect that many indigenous people continue to live and work on this land and acknowledge their ongoing contributions to this area. And I just wanted to get started with a quick overview of what you can expect today. We'll be going at just about an hour and we'll cover topics, who is New York Theater Workshop? What is this 2050 Artistic Fellowship? What is the application process? We'll then have an opportunity to have a moderated panel with a few past artistic fellows. And then afterwards, we'll have a moment for all of you to ask some questions through the Q&A feature, which I do want to just highlight right now. So as we're going, please feel free to ask your questions through the Q&A feature. And then when we get to the Q&A portion, we'll start answering those. We may answer some of these questions as we go, but feel free to start putting your questions in now. And without further ado, I'm going to pass it over to my colleague, Rachel.
Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for being here. My name is Rachel Silverman. I use she, her pronouns. I'm the Director of Project Development, Workshops, and Residencies at New York Theater Workshop. So just to talk a little bit about what is New York Theater Workshop. New York Theater Workshop is both a producing theater and a developmental space. We produce often 5 shows a season in our home in the East Village. And we also have a really robust developmental program that focuses on process and community building. So some of those programs or initiatives are the Mondays at 3 reading series. We do summer residencies at our partners at Delphi University and Dartmouth College. We have 4 companies in residence. Right now, those are the Dominican Artists Collective, JAG Productions, North Theater, and Safe Harbors NYC. And of course, this program, the 2050 Artistic Fellowship, which we're going to talk a lot more about tonight. But the mission of New York Theater Workshop is really about helping people to better understand the world. That's sort of how we think about the work that we're putting on our stage. We are committed to uplifting historically marginalized voices and stories. And we believe in supporting art that is generated from many different places, from a playwright, from a director, from an ensemble, from actors, and at artists who are at all points in their artistic lives, whether it's your first play or your 7th play on our stage. And often the work at New York Theater Workshop centers curiosity, experimentation, aesthetic diversity. We really believe in theater that is very theatrical. And we are in an exciting moment of transition at the workshop. For the last 34 years, Jim Nicola was the artistic director of the theater. And this season, we're so excited that we are welcoming Patricia McGregor as the newest artistic director of the workshop. So it's a very exciting time of transition and moving forward into the future. Now I'm going to bring forward my colleague and friend, Miranda Heyman, who's going to talk about the 2050 Fellowship.
Hi, everyone. Thanks, Rachel. My name is Miranda. I use they and she pronouns. I'm the 2050 Artistic Fellowship Advisor, and I also am a former fellow. You'll hear more about my fellowship experience later in tonight. And essentially, the New York Theater Workshop for the past 25 years has had so many different kinds of artistic fellowships. And the current 2050 Artistic Fellowship has been the primary artistic fellowship for nearly a decade. The 2050 Fellowship supports 6 early career artists who exhibit outstanding artistry and whose voices are underrepresented in the theater. When we say exhibit outstanding artistry, that means in, the many ways in which you might find that within a theatrical home, but we're really interested in artists who are have exemplified, a commitment to their craft and to artistry, and also whose voices are underrepresented in the theater. Like Rachel said, being able to reach out and see artists at all different stages of their lives and from all different walks of life. This fellowship is geared towards artists that generate their own work, which is inclusive of directors, playwrights, and solo performers. And also the fellowship prioritizes community building, artistic exploration, and meaningful conversation. One of the base, which I'll also speak on a little bit further, is the cohort. So really being able to have, that community within the cohort, within the New York Theater Workshop community, and all the artists that the New York Theater Workshop collaborates with, and also all the staff members and the greater artistic community here in New York City. And the 2050 Artistic Fellowship is one of the most meaningful and deep engagements we have with artists. It feels really exciting to be able to connect with these artists over a year and to be a place that they can call home for a year and beyond. So what's exciting about the fellowship is that there's all different parts that contribute to it. And, that really is both as much as it can be as flexible as each individual fellow wants, but also still having the structure that allows for, artists to be able to push themselves during the year. So one of the flagships of the fellowship year is a mandatory retreat in which takes place in June. So this year, obviously, it'll be June 2023, and then is bookended in June 2024, which means that the incoming class of fellows gets to have a retreat experience with the fellows that are outgoing. And then when you're an outgoing fellow, you get to also welcome the incoming fellow. So it's not just, obviously when we talk about community, there is that cohort, and then you're also meeting and interacting with another cohort alongside, also while being in retreat with the New York Theater Workshop artistic staff. We also have monthly fellowship meetings. Those take a variety of shapes and forms. We tell them at the beginning of the year, we really expect that fellows make it to all of them. It's exciting to be able to connect with your cohort once a month, and also being able to have guest speakers, have something that feels more casual, have something where, we're talking about a show and, everyone comes in and discusses. Sometimes, we just sit around and talk about what's on our mind, talk about what's going on. So the monthly fellowship meetings are a really exciting way to continue to have those connections with your cohort throughout the year. There's also opportunities for work sharings, and these can take the the form of anything, right? You know, stage readings, workshop, table readings, conversations around a specific topic. When I was a fellow, I felt really excited about being able to gather the New York Theater Workshop artistic community and my fellows and just talk about an idea that I was brewing, as well as doing something that, you know, was more like a staged reading of a work in progress. There's also, of course, mentorship from the New York Theater Workshop artistic staff. And that mentorship can, you know, look like lots of different things. It can look like, you know, top down, but also laterally, right? Like being able to see the folks at the New York Theater Workshop as your colleagues as well. And there's also the invitation to engage in the artistic life of the New York Theater Workshop, which at minimum is going to open nights, artistic staff meetings, and also various community events that are in the East Village and with the larger New York Theater Workshop artistic community. And also, 2050 fellows do receive both a stipend and an additional artistic development fund. And that artistic development fund can support your fellowship project, work in progress. It can support theater tickets, research or travel, anything at all that contributes to how you will develop and grow as an artist in the year. And I'm going to bring back Leo to come talk about the application process more specifically.
Great. Thank you so much, Miranda. So yeah, I wanted to start with just a sort of zoomed out overview of what the complete application process looks like for the 2050 Artistic Fellowship. The first step, and it's the step that most of you will take, is the preliminary application. And that will be due next Wednesday, October 26th at 12 p.m. Eastern. And after that, we will then solicit full applications from a smaller group. And those invitations to submit a fuller application will be sent in late November, and those full applications will be due December 14th. From that process, we then select folks to invite to the round of individual interviews, and just putting dates on calendars. Those will be in mid to late February. And then the final step of the application process will be a group interview with other folks that are sort of still in the running for the Artistic Fellowship. But now I'll sort of go and talk about each step more in depth. So first, again, is a preliminary application. These are all done via Airtable. And also just want to say that all of this information can also be found on our website. So we'll go over some of it sort of as an overview, but there's a lot more specific information that you can find on our website. But the preliminary application is just your resume and a statement that is 750 words or less that responds to these following questions. What kind of work are you interested in making at this moment and why? Are there questions that you try to pursue and interrogate in your work? And how does this fellowship at New York Theater Workshop specifically appeal to you as an artist right now? And that last question, of course, refers to there's dozens and dozens of fellowships here in the city at different theaters. We want to know why you think that New York Theater Workshop as a theater and this fellowship specifically would be great for you in your artistic development at this moment. And just all three of these questions are really just an opportunity for us to get to know you better and understand your values as an artist and how your work intersects with these three questions. And also just to say that these preliminary applications will be reviewed by members of the New York Theater Workshop artistic staff, and every application will be reviewed in full by at least 2 different people. And again, just upping the application deadline, which is next Wednesday, the 26th at noon. And again, after we review those preliminary applications, we'll then invite a smaller group to submit these full applications. And when we do solicit these full applications, of course, we'll have more information, but just an overview of what will be asked in that moment. A fellowship plan that outlines how you'd like to spend your fellowship year. In this fellowship, we like to say that the fellows really are like the artistic directors of their fellowship experience. So we really empower and encourage folks to sort of come in with a vision of how they want to sort of spend the year and what, where they want to use resources and what they want to work on and how they want to develop as an artist. We don't hold you to this fellowship plan, but we think of it more as a framework of how you'll approach this fellowship. We'll also give you an opportunity to submit work samples. And what that looks like for playwrights would be a full-length completed draft of a play. For directors, it'll be a collection of either images or videos from a production that you've done that'll have corresponding descriptions to sort of speak to what the image or the video, what's happening in that moment or why you made those decisions. And then for solo performers, we leave it up to you to decide what might best sort of showcase your work as a solo artist, whether that be a text or images or videos with some description. And we'll also ask for one letter of recommendation. And the fuller applications will be reviewed also by members of the artistic staff. And also we're going to be bringing on a few former artistic fellows to help in this review process. And these also will be read in full by at least 2 people. And again, these invites for those that are asked to submit full applications will come in late November, and they will be due in mid-December. And I'm going to now pass it over to my friend and colleague, Aaron.
Hi, Leo. Thank you. My name is Aaron Malkin. I use he, him pronouns. I'm the literary director and dramaturg at the workshop. And it is really my delight to be with you all this evening via Zoom in this odd way that we are still together, and also to be with our panelists for this evening. So I am going to briefly read some bios and bring them on, and then I have a few questions for them to sort of prime the conversation. And then we'll leave ample time for your questions. So again, as you have questions, feel free to put them in the Q&A. When we get to the Q&A portion, we'll try to get to as many of them as we can. So a little bit more about Miranda, who is just with us as both a 2050 Artistic Fellowship Advisor and a 1920 Artistic Fellow, a directing fellow. Miranda is a Princess Grace Award-winning writer, director, and curator, currently developing several projects in theater, podcast, and TV film with their production company, the Hodgepodge Group. Currently, Miranda is a resident director at the Roundabout Theater Company. Miranda is a graduate of Wesleyan University, where they double majored in German studies and theater and were awarded the Rachel Henderson Theater Prize in directing. We're also joined this evening by Sanaz Gajar, a 2014-2015 directing fellow. Sanaz is an Iranian-American director and writer of new works, musicals, and classics. Described by CultureBot as having a deft directorial touch, she has developed work nationally and internationally at Ars Nova, New York Theater Workshop, Brick Arts, Bushwick Star, Mercury Store, Prague Film and Theater Center, Bulgaria's Red House Center for Culture and Debate, the Invisible Dog Art Center, and others. She's an associate artist at The Team and New George's and New York Theater Workshop Usual Suspect, and proud faculty member at the Playwrights Horizons Theater School at NYU. And last but certainly not least, we're joined by Nathan Allen Davis, who is a 2015-16 playwriting fellow. And Nathan's plays include Nat Turner in Jerusalem, which was at New York Theater Workshop in 2016. Dontrell Who Kissed the Sea and The Wind and the Breeze. 3 of his plays will receive world premieres in 2023, The High Ground at Arena Stage, Eternal Life Part 1 at the Wilma Theater, and Origin Story at Theater Playhouse in the Park. Nathan is an alumnus of the University of Illinois, Indiana University, and the Juilliard School, and he currently serves as the director of MFA playwriting at Boston University. Thank you all for being with us this evening. And we're all here, and I wonder, maybe, Talia, do we just unshare for the slides for now so we can see our faces, and then maybe we can get back to the slides at the end if we need? Thank you. We are being supported tonight by Talia Sablon, who's our fabulous 2050 Artistic Administrative Fellow. So thank you, Talia. Thank you all for being with us. What a gift to be in space, virtual as it is, with all 3 of you. And to start off, I was hoping we would just talk a little bit about, like, what is stoking you as an artist right now? Like, what's lighting a fire under you artistically, to give the folks here a little sense of like where you're at. And then I have a few questions about the fellowship experience before we open it up for Q&A. So do we want to start with, why don't we start from the bottom of the biographies going up? Nathan, what about you?
What's stoking me as an artist right now? Oh, you know, I'm gonna just say life and I was talking to a friend and theater colleague yesterday on the phone, actually, and we were talking about, like, when I was in grad school, I wrote this play, or the premise of it was like, quote unquote, the theater had died, and you know, it's kind of a we were talking about that and how that sounds so different now than it did, I guess, at the time that I was working on it then. And I don't know, I don't know how to answer the question. I feel like I just really love theater, and I want to keep doing it as much as I can. And um, I think that I've been maybe a little uh, the past few years has been tough. You know what I mean? Um, so so like the things that I'm working on now have been things that I had started like before the pandemic, and I'm kind of digging into them. And I guess what's okay, to try to give you like a answer that's like legible. I feel like I want to write something where I don't have where I let myself find it, you know,
Mhm.
in the process, as opposed to a thing that I've been talking about, which is probably opposite for like a fellowship application process. But that's something that I would kind of long to do, is like have a little secret thing that I can like work on and be like, bow. So
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I love it. Thank you for sharing.
thank you.
Sanaz.
Yeah. Well, I'm Iranian, and so what's happening in Iran is very much at the top of my brain. And in relationship to that, I'm also, my grandfather died of COVID related, like, like he went to the hospital for COVID, but I would not say that that's why he ultimately passed. He was very old. And so, and since then I've been working on, that happened semi-recently. And so I've been sort of like grieving over that, and also thinking about how to write something about it, which I'm a theater director by trade, but I also write and I devise, and I have a small theater company that I work with on those things. And that piece it's called Blackout: Prayers for a Persian New Year. And that started before this political upheaval, and I'm constantly thinking about how to sort of marry the personal and the political. And so I've just been thinking a lot about how to do that, how to, a constant struggle to be Iranian but not be making work that's Iranian, but it's also just a hot button like culture, in this country, and people are always interested. And so I find myself both like gravitating towards that and shying away from it. But right now I'm working on that a little bit, and also and also taking some time to sort of take in, eat some stuff, like I'm reading Lighter by Young Pueblo, which just came out on the bestsellers. I mean, I think it's self-help, but it's helping me, so I'm gonna go with it. And I just watched actually Patricia McGregor, the Q&A that happened at New York Theater Workshop this last week, and it was really inspirational in the way that she was talking about process and how she starts from a funnel and sort of like teases down to precision at the end of it. Feels very similar to me, and right now I'm sort of just like taking in a lot of, I've seen like 3 shows this week, just so I'm mostly in that phase where I'm trying to find what does ignite me so that I can just start like going at it. So that's where I'm at.
Well, thank you for sharing that. Miranda.
Right now I'm obsessed with TikTok, both as a user and also as an artist. I think that I love the randomness of it. I love the chaos of it. I love the structural format of it, such that things, can only be a certain length. A lot of my projects right now that are existing in multiple forms, commercial, film, theatrical, are still talking about TikTok as a branch off of the larger tree or the tree itself. I feel very excited by the idea from an accessibility standpoint that there are people being discovered on TikTok in their homes as opposed to, having to travel. I feel really scared about the obsession of it, but I think like all things, there is no good or evil. And I'm really eager to see how it will continue to shape not only how we make art, but also how business and art collide. So I'm really excited about it. Like I said, from like a personal, as a user, you know, learned how to clean my toilet seat. That's useful. And also what the ramifications of it will be across the spectrum of ethical and accessible.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. It's such a treat to hear where you all are at in this moment. And thank you for being present with us. Thinking back on your time as a fellow at New York Theater Workshop, I wonder if there is one particular or one or two particular memories that stay with you that you'd like to share. And this is an open question for any and all of you. Sanaz.
One thing that I attended as much as humanly possible was the meetings with the whole staff that Jim and what I remember that brings me a lot of joy is the way that Jim and Linda would spend a good portion of that time like fighting. It was amazing. It was amazing because they were completely on the same page, but from like opposite sides of the spectrum. And oftentimes they were on opposite sides of the room. And it was just so amazing to watch this sort of acceptance of varying points of view, and how it was those meetings became a meeting ground, a meeting of the minds, and sort of like a laying down of what values meant things to people. I felt like I took so many notes, like I have so many sound bites, little like bits that I can find somewhere in a notebook. And I really started to understand sort of the fabric of New York Theater Workshop and how they make decisions, and how many institutions, but particularly the New York Theater Workshop, is so specific in how they do it. But it did give me a much clearer insight on how institutions in general, what goes into the process of actually picking something and putting it onto the stage, how long that development is, and how much it is based on these like one-on-one interactions and friendships that grow for long periods of time. So I think that was, for me, the most valuable thing, the most memorable thing that I got a chance to witness.
Thank you for sharing that. And just to provide a little bit of context, Jim Nicola was a longtime artistic director of New York Theater Workshop. Linda Chapman was a longtime associate artistic director of New York Theater Workshop. They worked together for 26 years, and the meetings that Sanaz is talking about are the weekly artistic staff meetings, which are an opportunity, and those meetings still exist while Jim and Linda have retired, but an opportunity to talk about logistics, aesthetics, and politics is how I like to think about them. And really, I think Sanaz is highlighting sort of respectful disagreement and conflict as an opportunity for growth being values of the workshop and values of the artistic practice at the theater. And those, I think, even as the people sitting around the table have shifted, those are values that continue to sort of be central to the ethos, and the invitation is there for fellows to participate in the artistic life of the theater in that way. Other memories that spoke, either Nathan or Miranda?
I can share one. Oh, sorry, I jumped over. Well, I think the biggest maybe thing that stuck with me was the extent to which New York Theater Workshop and the staff and everyone that we were talking with was so committed to the idea of a relationship with the artist, and that the fellowship is really about your artistic practice, and that it really is a space to actually be an artist. And so, like the retreats, I think in the beginning and the end especially, were really wonderful, because I think getting out of the city actually and being together and just having literally a different space to connect. And yeah, it was kind of a reorientation of like, I mean, obviously all of us are, hustling and trying to like, make moves and get opportunities. And that's always going to be like subtext, I guess, in terms of like what's going on when we're doing fellowships or any type of thing that we're submitting to. But I really felt like throughout the application process and like the interview process, and then even once it started, it was really all about like, who are you? How can we serve you? How can we help you? What are you thinking about? And that was just really nice. Nice is not really the best word, but it was a really good thing to have that. And then I also really have a good memory of just being in the meetings of the fellows, kind of in that second level room at the workshop, and just talking to other artists, every month. And I felt like just having the conversation, just being present in and of itself was kind of the point. A lot of times it wasn't even always about like what we got done or what we talked about, but just the fact of us being there. And yeah, those are the things that I stick with me.
Miranda.
So my fellowship year was very special in a lot of ways, but namely that I am a 2019-2020 fellow. So half my fellowship was in person and the other half was in the early days of the pandemic. And I would say that throughout, my favorite thing about the fellowship was the opportunities to gather outside of the fellowship meetings, like when we would all have our fellowship meeting and then want to keep talking about something that came up and then go out for drinks. Or, there was one point where I had a different residency that was with another fellow of mine. So then we were like separately, just like hanging out there. I really, and during the pandemic, I taught everyone how to play like, some online game. I cannot remember which one, but like we just kept finding ways to actually be friends and be in community with each other. So all of those little moments of when we were existing together outside of the building, but still obviously connected through the workshop, were some of my favorite moments.
Thank you, Miranda. Let us switch now to some Q&As from the folks who are tuning in. I will invite one or two of my colleagues from the workshop to rejoin this panel to answer some questions. And here we are. So again, if you have questions we see the questions that are in the Q&A, please feel free to keep those coming. And I think that there are a number of questions trying to synthesize. And if I also synthesize incorrectly and feel like your question hasn't been answered still, please feel free to like write in again. But there's a bunch of questions about the application materials, and I think about the fellowship plan and the work sample. And I wonder, Rachel, if you wanted to speak to those.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm going to try to synthesize, but in terms of the questions. So in terms of the fellowship plan, this is for folks who are invited to submit a full application. Part of that is a fellowship plan. And what that looks like is as you are right now, as you're writing this fellowship plan, what is an idea of how you would want to spend the year? So it's a way for us to get to know what's exciting to folks, what are you interested in working on, but it's not something that that you're held to in the fellowship. So you don't have to pitch a specific project that is the project that you're going to work on, but it is useful to talk about what is a project or two that you would be interested in working on under the auspices of this fellowship, as a way to talk about the kinds of work that is exciting to you right now. So there's not a specific, you're not applying to this fellowship with a project to work on specifically, you're applying as yourself. And that part of the proposal helps the people who are reading the applications get a better sense of who you are and what's exciting to you. And in terms of the work sample that you submit, I see there's a question around the what do playwrights submit? Is it a straight play or could it be a full libretto? You can submit whatever, a full play or a libretto would be fine. Whatever you think is a written piece that is your work that you want to put forward. And in terms of a fellowship plan for a director, again, I think the fellowship plan is both what are some things you might want to work on, whether that's projects you're interested in developing, but also what are the things about this particular fellowship that are exciting to you? Like, you could put in your fellowship plan that part of what you really want to do is actually like learn about, you'd like to AD on a production, or there's actually people, these XYZ people that you're interested in meeting, or people at the experiences that you're interested in having. So it's a really holistic look at how you might spend that year, and is an idea that we'll check in about after, in the fellowship year for those who are fellows, but not something that we stick to exactly.
Thank you, Rachel. So if there's others like more specific questions about those things, please feel free to keep writing them in the chat. There's a couple of questions about like, how does New York Theater Workshop define early career, which I know is always a complicated question. And I'm wondering, I think we're happy to talk a little bit about it, but I wonder if it might be useful for Sanaz, Nathan, and Miranda, if you could talk a little bit just about like where you were in your life as an artist when you were a fellow. What were some of the opportunities perhaps that you had had before? What were some of the opportunities that came after the fellowship, to give people like a rounder context of that, the answer to that question?
So for me, going into the fellowship, I did have a opportunity to have my directorial debut in New York. And I had, like fit for me too. I feel like I had been like, yeah, like I'm on SDC's health insurance, like I have enough jobs to be able to like keep this going. Still some in colleges, some, like in various places, but I feel that for me, I actually really considered definitely, why this fellowship. Because for me, I actually did feel like I was already, getting some of those gears going that solidify, I feel like I always talk about my theater career. Like, I feel like I actually turned it into a succulent as opposed to an orchid that I had to like be taken care of so diligently. I was like, no, I give it an ice cube every couple of weeks. It's good. So that's definitely where I was. But the thing that I really desired was community. I felt that particularly as a director, I had spent, the past 3 years in New York very alone. So I wanted to be able to have a place where everybody works in the same building. I'm not just in cohort in collaboration with directors. I'm also in collaboration with administrative staff and artists and playwrights and, just like the general artistic community. So for me, that's really was the need personally.
By the time that I was 27 when I did it, and by the time that I had, or 28, I don't know. By the time that I was a fellow, I had already done the Drama League fellowship, and actually the way that I ended up meeting Jim the summer before I applied was that I was a Drama League delegate at a festival in Varna, Bulgaria, I had my own theater company, and we had self-produced and toured in Europe for a couple of years, actually. I hadn't done any major assisting at any point, and actually during the fellowship, was when I did my first major assisting Rachel Trafkin on Hadestown. After, I would say that I think for me it was a shift from prior to and during the fellowship itself. I spent most of my time creating original work and self-producing my own work. After, I think that I became more interested in new play development and musicals. So for me, it wasn't so much about like new doors opening because of some fancy thing that I got. It was more about new avenues of creation that became of interest to me because of the conversations that I had specifically with some of the people that I was that were in my cohort, and listening to Martina Mayock's work when she was a fellow with me was incredibly influential in my understanding, watching sort of the play development that she went through with cost of living, and just so I think for me it was more about a shift in what I was interested in helping to bring into the world prior to and after the fellowship. But I didn't know, I don't know if I felt like I was emerging. I think that I'm like always emerging. I'm still emerging, like I still don't have health insurance through SDC, so I need some help, Miranda, figure out how to get all those contracts together because I'm working on it. But Jesus, anyway.
Yeah, I'm from the Midwest, Illinois originally, and I had gone to graduate school in Indiana, got my MFA, in playwriting. I'd had a rolling world premiere of a play, so like small productions in small theaters outside of, not in New York. And I had come to New York to do a fellowship at Juilliard, and then toward the end of that, I had applied for the NYTW fellowship, and I think I don't know, yeah, the emerging label is always a little tricky to know like what that means. I think what, for the purposes of the NYTW fellowship, it was important that I had some experience to be able to reflect back on like what I had done and how it had gone, and like just have some reference point for my own practice. You know what I mean? Like that was important. And then and then a sense of like why I needed this. You know what I mean? Like that it mattered that this would do something for me. I think that's kind of like the needle you're trying to thread in a sense. Is like you want to have some sense of who you are as an artist and have done stuff so that you can, you know, like you have a sense of yourself, but you're also moving forward. But then, you know, if you're already like doing your thing and you don't really need it, other than just like an extra thing or whatever, you know what I mean? Then it's hard to like. So I think that was kind of the sweet spot in a way. And I think that people, you know, in my cohort, it was, you know, it's hard to say like levels of experience or what have you, but I would say that for the most of the part, for the most part, we hadn't had like major off-Broadway productions, that kind of thing. But they're all people that had been working, you know, on some level. And yeah, so.
Thank you. There's a couple of questions about solo artists in terms of like how we define a solo artist, and questions about applying as a multi-hyphenate versus applying as somebody in a single discipline. And I'm Rachel, maybe Miranda.
Yeah, I can definitely answer that. And I think I answered one person specifically about how, you know, in the application itself, we do have room where you can say your primary discipline and also, you know, your secondary discipline. And then we'll also collate that obviously with the work samples and however you're also writing about yourself. So actually at the time of, when I applied for the fellowship, I felt that my primary discipline was directing, but also the New York Theater Workshop had known me and others had known me also as a writer and an adapter. And for me, I decided that I wanted to frame it as, you know, what I self-defined as my own house, right, for work, and then giving within my, you know, within my statement, with seeing on my resume, like seeing all the different ways in which like there's other places where you can speak about your experience, right? And it can come through in a multitude of ways. So I think that is up to each person, but multi-hyphenates, solo performers, something in between, we definitely welcome. And if there are specific questions, definitely feel free to email us.
You're muted.
I'm muted. There are also some questions about how people use the fellowship year and what resources there are to develop work. So I wonder if it would be useful to hear a little bit from folks about how they use the resources of the fellowship year, which were quite the three of you did quite different things with your fellowship years, which is really exciting to be thinking about all of the ways that you can use the funds.
I spent a lot of money seeing shows. A lot of it. And I think that I think I also went to the under the radar, like the APAP, whatever that is, like with where you can go to, they had it at the public, where there's like a session with like a whole bunch of different folks that come in from international spots, and it's like a really expensive ticket, and you can be there for like the whole week, and you know, Taylor Mack like gives a speech and blows your mind, and so I used my money to on that, and I think I also used it on concerts, like anything that I felt was, like I said before, for me artistically, I spent like I need all different disciplines to sort of get into my brain before I can figure out how I want to work, because I also work in a multidisciplinary fashion, and so the opportunity to like read, like buy a lot of books and see a lot of theater shows, but also movies, and also like attend conferences, those things I think were huge for me, and I spent a lot of my money on things like that. and also I think that yeah, so that I think that's how I spent most of my funds was in that way. And I also there were two different showings. I mean, this was like 8 years ago, so like forgive me, but there were two different showings, and I think I did like a good amount of devising in my second showing, at least, of just trying to figure out, like taking a book and like trying to like put it up on its feet, and sort of like so I think that it was strange, because there is this thing that they said, like, don't try to make something that you want us to then put on as a production like 2 years later or something, you know. And I really took that to heart, because the things that I put up on that I sort of did showings of were complete failures, and just in terms of like the idea that I was like failing very like rigorously in front of everybody, just trying to like get an idea out, but it also felt like that was kind of the point. And so I spent a good amount of my time at the workshop, spent my time failing gloriously.
Okay, I can so I did it like really like I wasn't that like I just did a reading. I did a reading and then did a regular playwriting workshop. So like, and it's actually funny because the workshop did produce my play that I had worked on in the fellowship, and I don't think that I really feel like that was like, well, actually, to Sanaz's point, like it's actually like the way I approached that project too was that I was like, I don't know what I'm doing with this. This might not work, and so like I was like, oh, I know I can do it here. And actually, I remember intentionally being like, if I have a thing, because you know you work at different things in different spaces, right? And I really felt like, okay, this is something that I can work on and know that like it might not work and it's fine. You know what I mean? Um, but like it was to the point where you know I did a reading of a draft of the play. It's around the table, and like I didn't really know what it was, and like it wasn't really. And then I just kind of that whole draft I kind of threw out, and then I went to a workshop in the spring where I had only written like part of the draft, and I finished the draft during the workshop. You know what I mean? And so like so but I didn't really like, and I saw a lot of theater as well, you know, and that was great. But I think I like echo the point of like it was a really good place to try things without fear of failure because you know it just frees up so much. And I also think I kind of when I had my original fellowship plan that I felt kind of guilty about it. It was like the first like you know retreat we went to. I had this plan and I don't think I really followed it through. I mean, it was like maybe not. You know what I mean? So I ended up like discovering it as I went, and that was good to be able to do that.
I'll also just piggyback on top of that, that I never went to graduate school. And so New York Theater Workshop Fellowship and the Drama League and the Audrey Residency and the Club Thumb Fellowship, like to me, these fellowships have been graduate school. And in that way, you know, I feel like because like everything that I do mostly is really public. And so it is really scary to like put out anything without fear that with the fear that it's going to fail, because I don't have as many, you know, safe spaces anymore where I can just like make work and not have it be judged by like, thank God Ben Brantley hasn't seen my work, but like, you know, and then and that I think is sort of on top of like another part of that whole like not having to worry about anybody doing anything but looking at your work from a space of like how are you developing your artistic practice and who are you as a whole artist.
Yeah, the only thing I would add is that I feel like I went the total opposite to use, you know, in the same vein as you, Sanaz, which is to say that I felt that so much of my growth was happening publicly that for my fellowship year, I really wanted to go super internal. So I spent, you know, a lot of my fellowship year just having conversations, taking workshops, doing classes, like doing research, developing things, because I feel that there's also so much, what I love about this fellowship is there's also so much pressure to present. but that's not, like, doesn't have to be a priority for you if you don't want to. If you really want a year to be able to turn into yourself, like people do who go to grad school, have the opportunity to, then I think, like that also can really just be a really internal and generative space for the self, as opposed to generative for what's going to come afterwards.
Great, thank you. Just to name that we're answering some of the questions in the Q&A feature, so please do follow along in there as well, because some of them are being answered with folks from our team typing in. There's a question about how, I think both how the 2050 Fellowship leads to other opportunity at New York Theater Workshop and to other opportunities outside New York Theater Workshop as folks' careers progressed. So I wonder, Rachel, maybe do you want to speak to the first, and then we can open it up to everybody for the latter?
Sure. In terms of how might the fellowship lead to other developmental initiatives? I think, at the workshop, we sort of think of all of our developmental initiatives as points in a conversation. And so like once we're having a conversation, and we have lots of different initiatives with different processes for getting involved. Obviously, the 2050 Fellowship is a wide application process. We also have a proposal process for our summer residencies and our readings that doesn't go out as wide, but gets circulated to our usual suspects and other like past fellows and other folks who we're in constant conversation with. So I think it just sort of opens the door to continued conversation around space to develop work. But also I think something that's important to note is we have historically gotten between 200 and 300 applications for the fellowship, and there are 6 fellows. But the fellowship application process is a tremendous a time of like an incredible introduction to lots of people, and like it starts a conversation whether you're invited to the full application and continuing or not. And it's there's a lot of introduction happening through this process and getting to know people, and artists getting to the workshop and workshops getting to know artists. And so I think, I just want to name that it starts earlier, and there are 6 fellows, but actually the process is a huge start of that. But I think that really it's a way to also begin in being involved in other ways. But I also think the fellowship is an equal part of many opportunities for process as coming in another area.
Yeah, I'll just say that in general, doing this is one of many different opportunities that has created like the constellation that is my career, and that they all in some way are connected to one another, but I can't actually tell you what it was specifically about the New York Theater Workshop Fellowship that got me the thing later because of that one thing, that it just feels like it's like the experience of being an artist in New York City, a director, a writer, like whatever it is that it is, like does feel like this, and has for the last 10 years, and so it's constantly like us. One day you're like, one day you're doing a show at like the venue you never thought you would, and the next day you're like drowning in debt, like that's sort of like the vibe of what my experience is, at least of and so in the same way, I'm sure that there are rooms that I was more warmly welcomed into, or people who have reached out to me because they somehow got my name through knowing that I did the New York Theater Workshop Fellowship. In the same way that like one time I was a drama league director, and then like 3 years later I went to a festival in Bulgaria and met Jim, Nicola, and we talked about like the weird Medea we saw with the duck. And then later that year I applied for this fellowship. And so maybe that like had an effect on this, you know, but I don't know if I can actually draw a straight line from one opportunity to the next. All to say that like even applying though for any of them, even when I didn't get them, was worthwhile.
Yeah, I think for me, a lot of it came just from the connections I made with my fellows, other fellows, and just the conversations that happened and the way that people generally try to help each other. So, yeah, I totally agree with the points that have been raised about, you know, the application itself has some value, just and the experience. I mean, you know, how can you can never tell what leads to what, but everything does kind of lead to everything, I think. Um, and I think that's another reason, and I think it's even kind of related to that question about like, you know, if you are multi-hyphenate, like how do you present yourself in the application? Like, I really think it's about like what do you actually want to do as an artist? You know what I mean? Like what do you really want to do? Because this is the place where you can actually like kind of dream that into existence. And I do think that when you're sort of walking your unique path as an artist and you're speaking to people about it, then they're better able to advocate for you, you know, because they see that in you. And you know what I'm saying? So I think because the fellowship creates the space, even the application process and the interview process and everything creates the space for that conversation, I think that kind of leads you closer because you're sort of, you know, having to hone your own message to yourself about yourself, you know. Which, by the way, like I generally don't. I mean, I know it's hard writing those applications and the statements of purpose. Like, I really not my favorite thing to do. But but looking back, on it, I think it's really valuable. You know, like doing that, and like I know at the workshop they take those statements really seriously. You know, they're really trying to understand who are you. So yeah.
Thank you. Well, we are coming to the end of our hour together. So I know Miranda is going to answer the question in the chat about the retreat, and just Rob, to answer your question, like everything we try to do is a conversation. We're trying to be a space for conversation, and those conversations take all sorts of different forms. So please keep in touch with us. Our email addresses are on the website. Invite us to work that you have. We do our best to try to see as much as we can. You know, say hi if you're in the theater or you see us in a different theater lobby. You know, we're trying, like, it's a community. We're a community, and we're so grateful that you are a part of the community with us. So there's all sorts of ways to sort of stay in touch and kind of deepen connections and relationships. If you have other questions that haven't been answered, there is fellowship info at nytw.org, where Talia is beautifully answering the questions that folks are sending in. And I guess we'll put that back up on the screen. Yeah, fellowship at nytw.org. I want to thank Talia and Leo for their tireless work to make this event happen. I want to thank Sanaz and Nathan and Miranda and Rachel for being with us and sharing of yourselves. And I want to thank all of you for being with us and for your interest in New York Theater Workshop and this fellowship. It's really dear to us, and it means so much that it's something that you're interested in. So again, like, until we see you in a theater lobby or you know, or run into each other on the street, everybody take care. We're here to answer your questions, and we look forward to more soon. Have a wonderful rest of your evening.
Thank you all so much.
Have a good night.